water bottles a day.
I remember when you guys took it down from 5 to 4.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen.
That was in 2016.
If you will be speaking tonight or are asked to speak, please come to the podium so you can be heard for the record. If you have a cell phone, please put it on silent or vibrate. If you need to take a call, please step outside. On that note, we have about 1 minute to air.
It went down to 68.
Who?
Yeah, because I called Jenny Pugh yesterday and she was at 12.
Not on my list of things to know.
For heaven's sake, come on. Always goes
I've always got you, Kerri.
That's what you get for it. Stuff. How'd you win bingo? Jen, how'd you win that bingo? Did Stephanie have her baby?
Yes, she had it yesterday.
Call the meeting to order. Please rise for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag
Of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Welcome to the August 20, 2019 Post Falls City Council meeting. Clerk will note that all council members are present with the exception of Mr. Borders, who is excused tonight. And before I read the announcements, I would like to inform everybody we have 5 public hearings tonight. Might be a record, I'm not sure. So if you wish to testify on any of those public hearings, there's a form in the podium in the back. Please fill them out, bring them up to Shannon, and we'll let you speak. There are a couple announcements. There will be a joint workshop between the City Council, Planning and Zoning Commission, and the Urban Renewal Agency on Tuesday, August 27th at 3 p.m. in the Trailhead Event Center at Camellan Park. The topic is development of downtown urban renewal district utilizing various tools. The city's latest neighborhood park, Crown Point, will officially open on Tuesday, August 27th, and there will be a celebration from 5 until 7:30 p.m. Crown Point is a 4-acre park with restrooms, a shelter, farm-themed playground, pickleball court, foursquare, and a basketball court. Are there any amendments to the agenda tonight?
There are none tonight, sir.
Are there any declarations of conflict? Please present the consent calendar.
Item A is minutes from the August 6, 2019 City Council meeting, and item B is minutes from the August 2nd, 2019 City Council workshop. Item C is payables, July 30th through August 12th, 2019. Item D is reasoned decision for the Green Meadows First Edition annexation. Item E is contract with BCR Land Services for water service upgrades at Black Bay Depot. And item F is Gabriel Estates Subdivision Construction Improvement Agreement. Item G is contract with JUB Engineers for engineering services for parking lot and drainage design at Hilde Kellogg Park. And item H is cell tower lease agreement amendment with Verizon Wireless. Do I have the old?
Looks like you had an old version.
So the Gabriel Estates Subdivision Construction Improvement Agreement was pulled on Friday.
Oh, I was just going to say, I'm following along.
I have a question, Mr. Wilson. And maybe I've just, after all these years, have forgotten, which I tend to do, I guess. Reasoned decision. So we go through all the public hearings, and now we have something called the reasoned decision. I don't recall those coming forward for separate approval.
So what we do, and there's been a name change along the way. We used to call these the findings.
Okay.
We now call them reasoned decision. That's the language that the statute uses, so we're trying to mirror what the statute says. So after we've gone through a hearing, we have an obligation to reduce to writing and issue a formal written decision. And so that's what we've been doing for the last probably 3 years, bringing forward after the hearing. We reduce it to writing, put here's what the action was, put it in writing so that everybody has a final written decision to work from.
I knew it was it was something that was probably normal, but I thought,
Yeah.
a reason decision.
The name
I just can't-
change,
name
I
change.
still struggle to say reason decision.
Okay,
I'm so
thank you
used to
very
saying
much.
the other thing.
Facts and findings.
Are there any other questions on the consent calendar? Seeing none, I'd entertain a motion.
Move to accept the consent calendar as presented.
Second.
Motion second, further discussion? Roll call, please.
Malloy,
Aye.
Borders. Sorry. Thoreson,
Aye.
Anthony,
Aye.
Wilhelm,
Aye.
Wolfe.
Aye.
Motion passes. Thank you. Next up on the agenda tonight is the unfinished business and update or representation of information requested from CityLink. Jody, name for the record, please.
Jody Beasy, Public Transportation Director. During the Public Transportation Workshop on August 6th, we discussed past service coverage, specifically service coverage prior to 2012 service changes, service coverage after 2012 service changes, and current service coverage. I've asked Jeff to walk you through the post-fall CityLink North population impact analysis map that's in your packet, which will provide additional data to service changes made to date. Thank you.
And you know how to switch this over? Sorry for the delay. Basically, what you had been given in your packet was a map. I don't know if you can all see it, but it reflected some kind of reverse engineered logic that we tried to come up with. I tried to go through and find, oops. And it's like this is not bringing up what I needed to bring up. So apparently our public website is not generating the data layers that I put into that map. So if I could use the projector, I'll have to just run through it through that. Sorry about that.
No problem.
Okay, so what we've done is we went through and after the workshop, the council brought up some questions about how the logic was for the 2012 change. And while no one present was involved in that process, we did go through and have some of the data that would have existed at the time that we could look at and then come up with the answers and kind of see who we believe is KMPO and the project manager at the time came up with a decision to change the route and go north into the populated sector. So what the map displays is 3 different buffers, and what we're using is a half-mile buffer. And again, that's what we're guessing the logic would have been used before. We now use a 3/4 mile buffer when we use any analysis for walking distance to the stops. But so the red boundary displays a half-mile buffer off of all the stops from the original routes that were pre-2012. The yellow boundary that you can't probably really see that well, but it runs down along here and then up in there, is the 2012 boundary. And then the blue boundary is our current routing. So when we went through and did the analysis, we used the structure data that we owned at the county for the residential unit counts for the city. And we came up with a 2013 residential unit count with the old routing gave us the 6,722 residential units. And then when we changed at the post-2012 change, that would have given us an increase of 6,811 residential units that were served by the routing. Now again, We don't know all the logic that was going into it, but we do see that with the routing change where they stopped going so far west, that they then served more residential population for the city of Post Falls with the diminished route. And again, the goal in 2012 was to cut the headway down from 2 hours to 1 hour to try to improve service. Now, when you look at the numbers now, it does look different because the old route, you had some small growth in the city between 2013 and now for residential units to the west, but you had a lot of growth up in the Tullamore area that wasn't accounted for when the routings were changed in 2012. One of the problems was apparently the plan for the city development and the plan for the transportation didn't anticipate the future growth that you had. Is there any questions about the data so far? Or the purpose behind the map? The only other thing to tell you or show you is the city limit boundaries in the gray is what it was in 2013 for the city of Post Falls. And then the green areas is where you have annexed out over the last 5 years. And then if you do look at the current data that we're serving and the current the potential numbers that we had. So the routes that would have existed prior to 2012 would have served quite a few residential units because it would still hit that Tullamore area plus the additional residential population to the west. The east-west route, if we were to only maintain one route through Post Falls, so getting rid of the northern section that came in through the blue route, we would have only had 6,679 residential units served. So that would have been much less than what we're getting now. And then we do have our current 7,576 residential units are served. Is there anything else I can explain on this map for you?
I believe so. Thank you.
I'm not sure if you have any other questions from the packet that I provided, but the points that Jeff made were the ones that we thought were important to provide the council with the fact that our coverage has increased.
There's a lot of discussion at our workshop. Council questions, Jody or staff?
I guess I've got a couple of questions. I guess what concerns me most is the huge increase over what we've paid in the past. When I'm looking at ridership really hasn't increased. The only thing that really increased as far as the budget was the transit center. But we had been told when they proposed the transit center that the cost of the transit center would not be pushed over onto the cities, in our case, Post Falls. So I guess my biggest question is, why the big increase? Ridership is flat. We haven't increased our routes. The only thing we've really added is the transit center that we weren't supposed to pay for in the first place. So why are we getting hit with the big increase?
Well, our ridership actually has increased since we made the latest change to the routes. So as a system, overall, the ridership has increased. The big aspect of that was, as Jeff mentioned, when you have longer headways, you typically have a drop in ridership, and we shorten the headways and we increase the ridership. So it actually, in the last several years, it's increased by 6%. On the transit center, that is not the majority of the cost. That's a portion of the cost, but that's not the majority of the cost. Operationally, labor has gone up. That's a significant increase. Fuel has gone up. That's a significant increase. So when we look at the overall operational cost, it's gone up, but this transit center itself is not the major driver. Also, we have a $1.5 million apportionment, and it's the match that you're needed to, for example, we've had to bank over the last 12 years enough money to be able to build the transit center. We are now going to buy new buses. It took us 12 years to bank enough cash to be able to purchase the buses. So what we're asking is to be able to have those operational costs covered. And yes, there is an increase. But I think if you recall, the Postfall was paying for the first, I think from 2007 to 17, you were paying,
21,950.
thank you so much. And so the increase, really, when you think about it incrementally, we're just asking for a 20%, 26% increase over the total cost of being able to provide public transportation service, which is approximately $223,000 for Post Falls.
Okay, I guess I'm still confused because I'm looking at this sheet that you provided to us.
Yes.
Ridership, if it's not flat, it's certainly not 79%, which is how much the increase is in cost to us. I can't imagine why the operations would have, I mean, I know labor's gone up, I know gas has gone up, but it hasn't gone up 79%.
Well, I think if you look at it in isolation from Post Falls, as opposed to the entire design and the network, we look at the whole network. We don't look at proportionate. We've obviously made some analysis for the purpose of Post Falls understanding their cash contribution and then the overall cost. But typically, you look at the entire bus system. You don't look at it individually. So, for example, if you have 30,000 people that live in Post Falls and you're saying, well, I'm going to take our share and then divide that out, you would then say that the only place they could go is Post Falls. You would have them circulate going through Post Falls because you would say, well, that's what we would pay for. But in essence, there's more people getting off at the transit center from Post Falls going to other cities than any other of the routes. So it's a system access. So they have access throughout the whole system, and that's what you would look at.
I guess that's not what I look at.
Well, I
I look
appreciate
at
it.
the impact it's going to have on our citizens here, and I really haven't gotten what I consider a really good explanation as to why it's gone up 79%.
Well, again, it's the total cost of the system has gone up, and that total cost has to do with labor, mechanics, it has to do with fuel. Some cost is for the transit center, but it's not the majority of the cost. Again, our system is for the whole system, so what we're really providing Post Falls is the opportunity to be able to travel outside of Post Falls should they wish, and so they can go to Hayden, they can go to Coeur d'Alene. Also, if you have, let's say, Parks and Rec, people may not all use Parks and Rec, but it's available to them to use, and so we're providing a service that clearly provides contribution to economic development, being able to access to health care, education, in those places. Thank you, sir.
Linda.
Well, I guess I totally understand what Councilor Wolfe is saying, and I think we've discussed this at the workshop as well, Jody, that all the years that I was on KMPO with Mayor Larkin as well, and the transit center was always promised that it was not going to raise our rates with CityLink. That being said, I feel like public transportation is very important, that people in Post Falls are going outside the city, and that although the hike in the cost just seems exponential, I'm going to be in favor. It's already in our budget. I feel like it's the fair thing to do. The other cities are stepping up, and public transportation is, I feel, an important part of our community, so I would be in favor.
Thank you. Joe.
So I guess to pile on to what Mr. Wolfe has been talking about, so have you guys been running in the red for the last several years and now have to catch up, or it's just?
Well, the way we operate is we are a cash basis. We don't borrow. We don't go against a negative. So it just takes us a tremendous amount of time to get to where we are. Previously, the way it was run was very informal. Obviously, I wasn't here during those courses of informality. Since I've been on board, we've transitioned to make it a formalized process and a network design that is predictable and effective and efficient. We now have on our bus cameras. We have a ITS system that enables the user to know where they are versus how they're going to get there using our bus system. So we've made significant improvements. We're going to be buying new buses. So it's not so much that we were operating in the red, but the cost over time has gone up, and it's really around the labor. Labor is a big expense, as it would be for most service organizations.
I guess the part I'm still a bit confused is labor tends to go up 2 or 3% a year. And so if we were still operating even or in the black last year, then labor didn't go up 79% this year. I understand there's other expenses too, but it's
Yeah.
massive.
Well, I would just say that we're not a business that we have a profit and loss statement. We're operational, we have our cost offset by grants, and the other is the contribution of the jurisdiction. So we don't necessarily operate as a business would say that we're operating in the red or the black, but we are operating in a cash basis system, and we have grants and contributions by the jurisdictions.
The other thing I didn't see either is a question I had in the workshop is, and I know you guys haven't tracked it, but I didn't know if you had any way to predict it is, or estimate is the actual number of unique users. So we've got the number of one-way rides tracked, but if you've got one person who's using the bus 5 days a week out and back to work,
Yeah.
then that's counting as 40 rides, 45 rides. So it's more of a curiosity. Are we serving 250 people here who use the bus a lot, or are we serving thousands who use it sparingly? I didn't see any data on that in the packet.
We typically don't count the unique user, but we are going to be conducting a survey for origin to destination, and in that we would have additional numbers. I would just like close by responding to that with an answer, but not necessarily a direct answer.
Right.
But if you were to talk to an employer, many of them, 20 letters, have asked for public transportation. They didn't say that they had the number of people that were going to be riding the bus. They said that we need public transportation in order to be able to provide that service to our employees. And I think you also have in your packet where Riverbend was denied an option for a company to come because there was no public transportation, so they were no longer considered an option for a company to relocate to this area. So there's a number of aspects of public transportation. Certainly the origin to destination is a critical one, but there's other aspects as well that contribute to the economy and so forth. Yes, sir.
Unlike Linda, I'm a strong supporter of public transportation. You brought up a good point that Riverbend was turned down because lack of public transportation. So is there any plans to maybe add Riverbend back in the future?
So one of the things that we want to do is we're going to be issuing an RFP for a service planning, and we'd like to do it over a 10-year period. And the reason why is that public transportation is changing and technology is changing public transportation, and we have innovative options that we would like to implement and want to be able to put a service plan together with the jurisdictions working with us in order to be able to identify the exact place for origin to destination and how that would best support employers, and they would be included in the analysis.
Okay. And I had one other question. I was just looking to the one handout you gave us at our last meeting, the projected expenses for the transit center. And they had one position, the program manager of 50%. Is that a new position?
That is a new position.
And then also the facility maintenance instructor would be a new position too? So
That's
you're
a,
looking.
that's a current position that we have, yes,
Okay,
sir.
so that position is there?
Yes.
It's just being shifted over into,
We actually recently hired that person for the purpose of being able to support the work that we need done, not only in maintenance, but other aspects of the system. And yes,
so they'll be maintaining the transit center then?
and bus
basically.
stops and other things, working with jurisdictions, hopefully in a cooperative program where we can actually serve bus stops as well.
Okay, thank you.
You know, when you first brought this to us, what, a month and a half, 2 months ago?
Yes, sir.
I think I was the one that said I wasn't comfortable with the numbers because you talked about a projected 3% increase, but the first year now, I think it was 71% instead of 79, unless my number was wrong, but it was over 70%. That's what caused my concern. And we've talked a lot about that. You know, you've come up with information, et cetera. It's percentage-wise, it's a huge increase for 1 year. Now, that being said, I raise a question also that we've heard for years that fees could be implemented for users. Goes back to what was said. Is it 3,000 people from Post Falls using the bus system, or is it 200, or is it 50? And I'm still not comfortable with. I understand what you're saying is the technology that's out there that you feel you would have to purchase will be outdated in a couple of years. So why spend the money now to collect the fee if that fee would only pay for the technology? And I'm oversimplifying, but I was talking with Mr. Wolfe, who just got back from someplace that said, you know, there's a bucket, there's an honor system. You drop 50 cents in, you got 3,000 riders in Post Falls. If they dropped in 50 cents, you know, a ride, you have what, $1,500 a month, $18,000 a year. And that's oversimplification, I understand that. my request would be, do not decide to forego collection of user fees for 2 years because of technology. Figure out a way to do it, because that defrays the costs. That would help us as far as decision makers up here support this. And understand it may not be the perfect system, but if you collect $1,000 to $1,500 a month, that goes a long way. Again, to tie it all together from my perspective, I agree. I think public transportation is important. I don't think there's a large percentage of people in Post Falls that use it, but I still think it's very important, and especially from an economic development standpoint. But it's been an interesting process to get where we are right now, and hopefully, if I can, I know Councilor Anthony and I spoke earlier. We talked about a joint powers agreement, where a joint powers team that had, like we do in Centennial Trail, where you've got representatives from the cities, from the county, so we know what's going on. Because right now we sit here and we get a request to increase our contribution by 71%. That's big. If we've got people involved who can participate in those decision makers, I think that makes it easier for all of us as well. So I would hope we would look to do something like that in the future.
If I may respond to that. On the fare system, I would say that we always welcome donations. We never preclude anyone from making a donation, and so certainly that is something that is open to the public. We'll obviously promote that more in terms of people understanding that they can make a donation and they can support public transportation. They don't have to wait for a fare. The reason for the implementation of the fare is the actual scanners and the collection of money, and then having to have it separate where you have different people count the money, collect the money, and the implementation of what it would take to put a typical fare system on the bus is what the cost is obviously very high. So what we are doing is we're taking advantage of technology, meaning that we would have an app, and then that app would then serve as an opportunity for us to have it be paid for like Apple Pay or something. So those are more effective and efficient, innovative ideas as opposed to traditional fare systems, and that's what we were talking about. So thank you for that.
The only concern again is I think, as you told us before, it's 2 years down the road. And
Absolutely.
I hate to forego 2 years worth of potential income, and I wouldn't make it a donation. I would make it a fare and say, pay
Here's
something.
a fee. Okay.
Sure.
I have a question about assurances, and I know that we paid, a certain amount for many years, and
Yes.
then now this is like 71%.
Yes.
What assurances do we have that there won't be another big request coming? Another 71% or
Yeah.
50% or?
Right, I hear that. I think that on the system that we currently have and the one that we're proposing, obviously there will be an incremental change when you increase the service area. But Shelley and I had an email exchange, and I think that having people from the jurisdiction sit through the process is an excellent idea, and I would welcome that. I think it would be wonderful because we have obviously all the information that's available to you. You can be real-time making decisions, and certainly what the jurisdictions want as far as the public transportation system is what we want to support. That's my answer. Unfortunately, I can't anticipate any insurances that I could say I can guarantee there's no increased cost, but any cost that we have, we're more than happy to share with you along the way. So then that way you understand, well, here's what it costs for gas, and here's what it costs for drivers, and here's what it costs for insurance or maintenance, and we're happy to share any of that information. And as far as service routes themselves, where we are now, if you were to say you want to cover more of Post Falls, or if the jurisdictions were to say we want to have more coverage, then obviously the farther you go out, the more expensive it is. So what we are trying to do is come up with innovative ideas is how do we do first mile, last mile? How do we reduce that cost? So those are the things that we're working on, is how do we expand service without increasing the cost incrementally?
Yes, the expansion of service,
Yes.
that's where we need to be at the table.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. So that's why the service planning that we're going to be doing, we want you all to be participating. We don't want to do anything without the jurisdictions understanding fully what we will be able to provide and let them choose how and what type of service they want. That would be the decision of the jurisdictions.
Because I know that we're going to make a decision. This is an action item, isn't it?
Yes.
Yes.
So we'll make a decision on this, but we
Yes.
would probably, I guess I can only speak for myself, I would probably not be supportive next year
Oh,
of a big increase.
right. We don't anticipate a big increase over the next several years. So I can say that's not our anticipation. I was referring specifically to increased service areas.
Okay.
Yes, I apologize.
Further comments? No.
This wasn't anticipated either
Oh, my goodness.
this year,
Oh,
By us.
oh, yes,
right?
yes. You know, I honestly hear you. I want you to know that I hear what you're saying. And it's difficult in the sense of when you've been paying the same amount for a long period of time and then the adjustment comes, I understand. That's why we would prefer to be able to provide incremental additions based on the approval of all the jurisdictions. So obviously, we're looking at everyone coming to the table and saying, this is what public transportation looks like, this is what it costs, here's the fare that we're going to implement and how that's going to offset the cost, but it won't pay for public transportation. But clearly, we want to make it where it's effective, efficient, and cost-effective. So,
I guess I have one more question.
Good.
So what you have requested that we pay, is that a request? Or, so could we say, well, we aren't going to pay, I have to go back here.
The action item is to approve the amount requested, yes.
Yes. Or we think a 3% increase, we're willing to pay that. So is that part of something that we are?
It's up to council. It's up to council.
our request is what we've requested, yes.
It's not an assessment.
No. I'd entertain a motion if there's no further discussion.
I would move to approve the 2020 request to CityLink in the amount of $57,910.
I'll second it.
Motion second. Further discussion.
I would just like to point out, and I want to make it clear that I'm not against public transportation in any way, shape, or form, any more than I'm against public protection, fire, police, water, sewer. But if any of our other departments came before us in a budget meeting and said that they wanted to increase our fees, their portion, if Chief Knight came in and said, you know what, we need more police officers, we're going to up it 70%, we would be up in arms. This is craziness to me that we didn't see this coming, and I just feel like if we're going to have a joint powers group, it should have been before this. I just feel like we're just kind of saying, oh, we want public transportation, so we're just going to pay the dole. And quite frankly, you didn't explain to me why there's that increase. You talked about 6% rider increase, cost of labor. All of that would have said,
excuse me.
all of that would have told me that a 5, 6, even 10% increase. Okay, I can live with that. This is just too much. It's just too much. I just can't get my arms around it when we ask every other department within our city to hold costs down for our citizens, and then to have public transportation come in and say, we just need more money. I can't support that. And as the mayor said, I just got back from Juneau, Alaska, and they have a box, plastic box, $2. If you don't have $2, you don't get the ride. It's that simple. But we haven't been able to figure out how to charge a fare. If we charge, this is the number that gets me, if we charge the riders $1, we wouldn't be having this discussion right now. $1. That's all we're asking, is that user fee of $1 for the people that actually use the service. So that's why I can't get behind this. Sorry.
Motion second. No further discussion. Roll call, please.
Thoreson,
Nay.
Anthony,
Aye.
Wilhelm,
Aye.
Wolfe,
Nay.
Malloy,
Nay.
Motion fails. Is there another motion that we could bring forward if someone so chooses, or is that an alternative motion? If someone wanted to come back with a different amount, or how do you?
So the action item you had tonight, you squarely answered it, was for the increase. So
Is that the end of it at this point?
Yeah, if you want to tell us you want us to look at a different option and bring it back to you, we can do that. And
Counsel?
then bring that back as an action item.
I would entertain a different number.
Okay. Okay. So we can schedule that.
We could do any of the three.
Is that what we had?
So the memo, I'm the one that wrote the memo. The memo said you can either approve partial, whole amount, or none of the amount. So you had three options within the memo.
So, Mr. Wilson, if that was in the memo, we're fine then to make another motion if someone so chooses? Anyone care to make a different motion?
Well, I don't have a calculator, so any number I threw out there would be so random and arbitrary.
I would move that we approve an allocation to public transportation in the amount of what we paid last year, $33,950.
Any second? Motion dies for lack of second.
I would move that we approve an allocation of what we paid last year plus 10%.
I will second that one.
Motion second, further discussion. Roll call, please.
Wilhelm,
Aye.
Anthony,
Aye.
Malloy,
Aye.
Wolfe,
Aye.
Thoreson.
Aye.
Motion passes. Thank you. Hopefully, like I say, we'll get a joint powers board and we can sit tight and go through it next year. Next up on the agenda is our first of the 5 public hearings, and the first item is the fiscal year 2020 budget. Jason. Open the public hearing.
My chair is shrinking down as I'm sitting here.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. This is the first and only budget hearing we'll be having on the fiscal year 20 budget. And we've had 3 budget workshops, and just wanted to put this out there that this budget for fiscal year 2020 was built on a no property tax increase. The options are 0 to 3%, and it was clear that council wanted to not take the 3%, so the budget I'm presenting with the detail, and that was by summary, was built without a 3% increase.
Excuse me.
Excuse me, before we get started, since CityLink is in this budget for that amount of money,
Right.
maybe Joe can have his tax decrease this year.
Yay.
Just saying.
I'm not
Thank
sure
you.
that 20 grand will cut it.
Don't be ungrateful, Joe.
Thank you.
All right. This year's budget, since we had the summary in discussions at one of the budget workshops, I wanted to do a side-by-side comparison of what we have this year by fund and what also we have in comparison to last year's budget. If you look at the general fund expenses, they're just it was just about a little bit over a $1.3 million increase from general fund fiscal year 19 to fiscal year 20. If you look at the dedicated funds, which are 2 funds, which is the personnel expense, which is where our medical is paid out of through a general fund contribution, and also annexation fees, there's a slight decrease from almost 6.5 to 5.3. So total general fund expenditures slightly increased, about $170,000 when compared to the prior fiscal year, based on the proposal for fiscal year 20. So if you look at the special revenue funds, which include 911 support, drug seizures, special events, and the cemetery capital improvement fund, that's what the special revenue fund consists of, and that is basically the same as being proposed for fiscal year 20 as it is in fiscal year 19. Capital project funds, those are all the impact fees, and what happens is they collect enough impact fees to actually do the projects within the fiscal year that they have them assigned. So in 19, the budget was almost $8.9 million, and for fiscal year 20, the use of impact fees, the projects are going to total roughly about $7.8 million. Debt services fallen slightly from some interfund loans that are being paid off. And also, if you look at the utilities, the enterprise funds has a slight decrease from fiscal year 19, what's being proposed for fiscal year 20. So a side-by-side comparison, if you look at the budget that was proposed in 19 to 72.5 million, and what I'm proposing for fiscal year 20 is a $68 million budget. And of course, by Idaho law, the expenses have to equal the revenues to present to council balanced budget. So, going into the general fund, I wanted to look at what items are being proposed as being funded. For the police department, I'm proposing 3 patrol officers. Half of the patrol officer is being funded by the Post Falls School District, but we still have to budget the full position. Along with that, for the police department, they'll have 3 new vehicles for $180,000. The legal department, I'm proposing a assistant city attorney. Streets department, I'm proposing a street maintenance worker for $64,980, and also for fiscal year 20, additional $30,000 of snow and ice removal. And those are based on what prior years we've spent. The departments have asked for additional because just anticipation of the snow removal. For fleet, an additional mechanic, a UTV plow for sidewalks and be used for streets, and also we'll have a vehicle replacement of $375,000 for fleet. For the Parks Department, I'm proposing a turf grass specialist of the $58,000, Parks custodian for $50,000, and as I proposed the Parks custodian, there will be 2 seasonal employees that will be removed if this position is funded. And also Parks has a replacement schedule of their vehicles of $230,000. Also in capital lines, we have put money aside each year for facility replacement and for if we have future needs, and also we are looking at a vehicle replacement schedule of funding depreciation of existing vehicles, and these monies will be used not for new vehicles but for replacement of existing, so we have the money aside when their useful life is over. And also for insurance costs have increased roughly 20%, but I'm asking that we fund the medical for an additional $250,000 based on our employees and what the current cost is going to be for next year. And those are the items I'm proposing.
Questions, Jason? Seeing none.
Okay. And at the next council meeting, I'll have the budget ordinance.
Thanks, Jason.
Thank you.
Is anyone wishing to testify?
We have none.
Not going to rebut. I will close the public hearing, and I'll start comment real quick by saying that our staff for years has brought us a balanced budget, which is nice. Not all requests are funded, not by any stretch of the imagination, but I appreciate the effort staff has gone through to bring us a balanced budget with no tax increase. But I also want to say, we have some things coming up down the road, closeouts, urban renewal, et cetera, but we can't anticipate that the growth is going to continue at the level that it has right now, and the growth has funded a lot of this, so we're kind of kicking the can down the road, and eventually there will come a time when we will have to take an increase, and it's been great that we haven't had to at this point, but the time will come. So I just don't want people to think that we haven't taken an increase for X number of years and we're never going to have to again. It will happen, but I think the city's been financially prudent, and I appreciate the effort, especially on staff side. Any comments?
I'd move to authorize staff to return September 3rd the budget ordinance for fiscal year 2020 in the amount of $68,127,561.
Second.
Motion second. Further discussion? Roll call, please.
Thoreson,
Aye.
Anthony,
Aye.
Wilhelm,
Aye.
Wolfe,
Aye.
Malloy.
Aye.
Motion passes. Thank you. Thanks, Jason. Before we start our next public hearing, I'm just going to mention that if you see me shivering up here, I'm not afraid. It's cold.
It's definitely cold.
So I'm shivering, but I just wanted you to know that's why. So,
69 degrees.
Mr. Wolfe, Mr. Malloy, I guess, and myself, we have a disadvantage up here. We need hats, but anyway.
Wait a minute, you're including
Next public hearing tonight is Landmark Place annexation. I'll open the public hearing.
I just got back from Alaska.
Well, good evening, Mayor, President Council Wilhelm, Commissioner, Council members, pardon me. My name is Jamie Hayes. I am here to present the landmark annexation. Case file ANNX-3-2019. The owner is Rose of Sharon Enterprises Incorporated, and the applicant is Ace Solutions. The City Council is being asked to review the annexation request of approximately 11 acres and to make a decision of approval or denial of the proposed single-family residential R1 zoning designation and annexation. What you see hatched in red is a project proposal. We have Interstate I-90 running to the north of it, Interstate I-90 right-of-way, the project proposal. Just to the south of it, we have the Centennial Trail. We have a collector as being McGuire running north and south. And I'm going to point out Lundy Street right here, kind of running to the northeast, we'll say. This is about 1¼ mile from the Pleasant View intersection and about a ½ mile from Saltese Way. It's currently vacant but zoned high-density residential by Kootenai County. There's no significant topology or vegetation concerns. The water and the sewer are both provided or will be provided by the City of Post Falls. The Planning and Zoning Commission made a recommendation of R1 zoning based on the 6 zone change criteria. You can find them detailed in your staff report. This is the current zoning for the proposal. Everything in yellow to the north of the highway is residential. What you see in gray is industrial. There's a little bit of red, which is commercial. And then we have the light purple, which is an SC3 SmartCode zoning, and a residential mobile home park in brown. The future land use zoning has designated everything in yellow as residential, which would encompass the project proposal, and what you see in red is designated as commercial. There are 11 annexation policies that you can find in your staff report. What I'll cover are some of the most pertinent to the proposal: that owners of the land seeking annexation should grant or provide necessary rights-of-ways and easements. I'm going to go back to this current zoning map to show you that the rights-of-ways would be dedicated along McGuire, and there will be a utility, multimodal, and emergency access easement that will be dedicated, and this is just north of Lundy, and it's the second parcel right here that my cursor is on, about a ½ of an acre. Land to be annexed should enable completion and continuation of a pedestrian network. Through that easement dedication, there would be continuation to the Centennial Trail and to what you see right here in this brown spot is the Trailer Wave Park River access as well. Timing of annexation should be coordinated with opportunities for orderly development of the public systems, primarily sewer and water, which this would be orderly development with the continuation of sewer and water to this general area, potentially providing sewer and water access to the other residents to the south. And that the city is, and the purveyor's ability to provide water services and wastewater collection is just kind of reaffirmation that this is in line with the transportation and the utilities wastewater master plans. Inclusion agreements for the annexation are the relinquishment of water rights, if any, upon development, dedications of right-of-ways, like I had spoken about for McGuire Road, including a 15-foot sidewalk drainage and utility easement. The parcel in question there, 5140-1-15-B, is what I showed you. That is just north of Lundy. That would be the easement that would be required upon annexation. Certification of existing sanitary sewer, requirements of water system looping with the future development, establishment of an access point on the eastern end of Lundy Boulevard for emergency access for pedestrians, and for, I'm sorry, I just missed the third one. We're going back to emergency services. These are the agencies routed. Agency response: Post Falls Police Department and Kootenai County Fire are neutral on the proposal. The Post Falls Highway District requests that the city annex the full width of McGuire Road, fronting the annexation, allowing for a continuity of the city services along with the ease of maintenance. Access onto McGuire Road and West Lundy Boulevard require an access permit from the Highway District, and that there could be further requirements upon development. Once again, here's the subject site. Do you have any questions about this annexation?
Questions, Jamie?
Jamie, talk to me a little bit about the water.
The water?
Yeah.
Well, I want to give you the best information possible, so I will ask Bill to come up for that, considering that that is primarily an engineering and less of a planning.
Okay. I guess my question, I know that we put water down to the trailer park.
We did through the end of the trailer park. Last year, the developer extended it down through there. This would provide that extension as well, so.
So we can tap right into that, because the staff report said we'd have to drill underneath the freeway
There,
to do a loop or something.
there was some review, so that is something we would look at the time of development, is whether we would need to make and complete that loop underneath the freeway to tie into our system on the north side of I-90 through there. So that's, depending on what is developed and what happens at the time of development, we wanted to bring that up, is that we would do that analysis and run through there at that time, so.
So if we determine that we have to drill underneath the freeway to continue that loop to
Right.
make that develop, who shoulders that cost?
The developer would shoulder
The
that
developer
cost.
would?
Yes.
Okay, because it wasn't clear in the staff report, and then I saw it in the P and Z comments that.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, so.
So
no,
they're going to pay for that?
That would be their cost, yes.
Thanks, Bill.
Thank you.
One more question, just below that, Cannon, Lewis, Lundy, is that all county right below there?
Yeah.
Yeah. Because I know Breezy Way is county.
Yes, ma'am. Everything, including what you see in red, is all in the county right now. You can see that the city boundaries are this black line.
Okay. Because I know the mobile home park is not.
No, it is.
Is that in the city now? Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Any other questions, Jamie?
Any other questions?
Thanks, Jamie. Does the proponent wish to speak? Name for the record, please.
Good evening. My name is Roger Glessner. I'm with ACE Solutions. We represent this project for the owners, 609 Calgary Court, Suite 7, Post Falls, Idaho. And we are aware of looping the water in, and we are aware of what we've talked about so far is going underneath the freeway. There may be other avenues once we get to the design portion of it, but we are aware of that. Another thing too is the emergency access road going down onto Lundy would be a gated access. And we've already discussed that with the city in some of our pre-meetings and with the fire department. So it'd be a gated access, so we wouldn't have travel going through there. And we would hopefully deter some of the ATV or off-road travel that's going through that property now and the property to the east by doing that. Right now, that property is it's vacant. It was proposed for some type of a subdivision or residential, I believe maybe even a mobile home park at one time, and there is a partially built sewer system in there. And we would utilize that system once we ensured to the city that is a usable system. At the same time, we feel that we're gonna be enhancing the property by putting a private road in there, a nice residential subdivision, kind of a gated community, rather than what's there. And what's there right now are people going back and forth through there, gaining off-road access further down the Centennial Trail to the east, which I believe is making it, tough for the city to police that. And so this will help detour that. It'll enhance the property that's there. We are aware of the right-of-way and the improvements that we'd have to do on McGuire Road. And I think that's it. Those are some of the highlights. Other than that, we do agree with the staff report on this project.
So that was my one question. So the road off of McGuire would be private and maintained by the HOA then?
Correct.
Not the city?
Yes, it would. Yep.
Questions? Thank you, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone wishing to testify? Wishing to testify in opposition is Nancy Myers. Nancy, please come forward and name for the record, please.
Good evening. My name is Nancy Myers. I live on Cannon Avenue, which is the first street south of there. My major concern, and it's a concern I have now, McGuire Road is the only access road in and out of there. Adding more houses in the case of an emergency could create even a worse problem than we would have now. There is no other way of getting in there or out of there. And that, to me, creates a safety issue. The one at the end of Lundy, the question I would have there, if they went to that, if they gated it, they would have to make it on the other side of the Centennial Trail, or they would block access for a lot of us that walk our animals. That's just, I don't know how that would work. My main issue is safety. That's all I have.
Thank you, ma'am. Care to rebut?
Yes, just to touch on the access, current access off of Lundy going to the Centennial Trail is through private property at this time. There is no public access through there. With this annexation, we would put in an emergency access road and a sidewalk or a pedestrian path that would go in there as well. The roadway itself would be gated, the pathway wouldn't be. So they would be gaining access where they really don't have access now. The other thing is our private road is going to enter McGuire approximately 200 feet south of that the westbound road, frontage road on the south side of I-90. There, that is
River Bend.
yeah, River Bend. So you have two access points down McGuire or down River Bend, and we're only about 200 feet south of there where we're entering in. So we're not really adding a lot of impact right there. As far as emergency vehicles, there's only about 300 feet. In that 300 feet or so of road frontage there on McGuire, we will be upgrading that. We will be required to widen the road and also install a pedestrian path or a sidewalk there. Those are two things that are not there right now. So,
Thanks, sir.
thanks.
Then I'll close the public hearing. Council, how'd you like to act?
I would move to approve the Landmark Place annexation.
Second?
Motion second, further discussion? Roll call, please.
Anthony?
Aye.
Wilhelm?
Aye.
Wolfe?
Aye.
Malloy?
Aye.
Thoreson?
Aye.
Motion passes, thank you. Next public hearing tonight is Prairie and Spokane Street annexation. Open the public hearing.
Good evening, Mayor JACOBSON, Council President Wilhelm, and other members of City Council. John Manley, Post Falls Planning Manager, introducing case file ANNX for 2019. The current owner of this piece of property is the City of Post Falls, and so we are requesting this annexation. It's in the county. It's approximately 1 acre, and the proposed zoning for this is R1. There's no intent to construct this as a single-family subdivision. This is more or less a housekeeping item as the interest is to attain the necessary right-of-way for realigning Spokane Street. So as you see, here's the site location. It's on the southwest corner of Prairie and Spokane Street. Just to the north of this is the Crown Point development. There is a little bit of an alignment issue here that created the necessity to purchase this property, and now in order to do improvements, annex it into the city. So most recently, it did have a single-family home on this. It's been now torn down, so it's now a vacant piece of land mostly. There is, I believe, a shop on it that's future is to be determined. There's no significant topography or vegetation matters with this site. If this site was to be developed with some city amenity that necessitated water, that would be provided by the East Green Acres irrigation, with the city providing the sewer. On July 9th, Planning and Zoning Commission did review this against the zoning criteria and found that the R1 zoning district met these criteria points. It goes into further analysis in your staff report. Here's the surrounding zoning. It's all R1 to the south, and the purple you see is the SC4 to the northwest of Spokane and Prairie. Some may wonder why the R1? I mean, if it's going to be a public, we don't really have a public reserve or an open space zoning district, so you have to apply some zoning district. And so R1 seemed to be the most appropriate, plus it would allow still the city to do improvements as needed within that R1 area zone. Future land use also designated this as the residential land use designation. Looking at the annexation policy points, just to highlight the most applicable of the 11, seek completion and continuation of pedestrian network and connect neighborhoods to amenities. So by getting these right-of-way improvements on Spokane and Prairie, we will get improved pedestrian connectivity and not have like a county pocket of unimproved sidewalks. Be consistent with city master plans, water, sewer, transportation. This would be the case. Should be given priority to infill. This is an infill pocket. And it would be a logical extension of the city for the criteria there, and defined further in the staff report. Agencies routed, as you see here, there were police department. They commented as being neutral on this proposed annexation. I'd stand for any questions you have for me at this point.
Question, John, Steve.
With the future alignment, would there be enough property left over for a future dog park?
I would leave that up to Dave to.
Or is that too small?
A little too small, yeah.
What?
You need 2 to 3 acres.
That's what we hope, but.
Actually, I thank you for letting me get up here so I could stretch my back, so I do appreciate that.
You're just moving around a little.
Yeah. It's a little smaller than we want. We would consider uses in there, but I know discussions have looked at possibly lift station, realignment in there, park and ride, but dog park is something else to be considered.
Small dogs.
Yeah,
Very small dogs.
Just, I get a lot of people who request a
Maybe a
dog park.
sheep park would be more appropriate.
Across the street.
Thanks, Dave. Al, you had a question?
John, I know you mentioned that we bought this to realign Spokane Street. Is there any future plans of maybe putting a roundabout there, or are we going to use, I guess I'm kind of back to the question that Councilor Anthony had. Is there any other use for that property that we could use?
Once again, pertaining to the roundabout, I'd default to Bill to talk about the plans for that.
Okay.
Thank you, John.
Get everybody involved.
I think we need
Yeah,
law enforcement to weigh in too.
Mayor, Council, we're currently in the planning process of putting together a project that would finish a lot of the majority of improvements on Spokane Street all the way from Prairie to Poline Avenue through there. A roundabout is one of the options that we're strongly considering for this location. There's been a series of them along Prairie. They seem to function well and slow down. So that's our intention, is to do that. There's also, we've been cashing out frontage improvements from the Crown Point subdivision to the north across the street, and would complete all of those as one project. So it didn't look like it was just kind of a piecemealed together project. So we're not sure we can pull it off next year. Probably a 21 timeframe is when we would complete that. We just kind of went through tasks, and we're putting together a timeframe just last week on that. And so we'll eventually be coming forward kind of with some more formal details on that. But yes, that is the long-term plan, is to try to put in a roundabout at that location. We've got the northeast corner, which is still in the county, which we don't have right away there. So, we'll just have, once we get a designer on board, and kind of play with the geometrics of that roundabout to see how that'll work. But that is our intention.
Thanks, Bill.
Thank you.
Kerri.
And if you'd like to mark this date on the calendar, it would be the day that I say that would be an excellent place for a roundabout.
Hey.
I use that intersection a lot,
Yes.
and people are really cruising through there. I think that would be,
It's helping those intersections flow where we have them along Prairie Avenue, where you're not having to have people stop, but I think it also has a calming effect a little bit to Prairie Avenue that I notice if I'm driving home and I'm on Prairie, I'll tend to pick up speed till I hit one of those roundabouts. So it works out for that as well. So
Thank you.
thank you.
Anyone wishing to testify?
We have none.
Not rebutting.
I'll close the public hearing. Council.
I'd move to approve the Prairie and Spokane Street ANNX-0004-2019.
second.
Motion, multiple seconds. Further discussion? Roll call, please.
Wilhelm,
Aye.
Wolfe,
Aye.
Malloy,
Aye.
Thoreson,
Aye.
Anthony.
Aye.
Motion passes. Thank you. Next up, Nelson Williams annexation. Open public hearing.
Good evening, Mayor Jacobson, Council President Wilhelm, and council members. I'm Ethan Porter, Planner 1 with the City of Post Falls, here to present the Nelson Williams annexation, as you mentioned, case file number ANNX-5-2019. Your staff report will note that there are two owners. Currently, Dean Hardwick purchased the properties, so now there is one owner, Dean Hardwick, and the applicant for this proposal was Mark Latham. The City Council is being asked to review the annexation request of approximately 1.04 acres and to make a decision of approval or denial of the proposed Community Commercial Services CCS zoning designation. Here you can see the project location hatched in red. We have Mullen Avenue going east and west, Highway 41 going north and south, and then Regal Street going north and south as well. Again, like I said, this is approximately or just over 1 acre for the size. The current land use is vacant land within Kootenai County. There is no topography or vegetation issues or hazards on site, and the water and sewer would be provided by the City of Post Falls if this were to be approved. Looking at the surrounding zoning, you can see the commercial all in red to the north, to the east and south, and then the southwest you have some commercial and industrial in the gray. To the northwest you have R2 residential in the darker yellow, and then in the lighter yellow it is R1 residential. I would like to point out north across the street, that big red commercial block is vacant commercial land currently. So planning and zoning recommended the CCS zoning based on these zone change criterias that you can further see and go into detail in the staff report. Looking at the future land use designation for the site, it is designated as commercial, as you can see here. And then going into the annexation policies, there's 11 within the staff report, but highlighting the pertinent ones. We look at this being an infill pocket. It is surrounded by the City of Post Falls on all sides, as well as this would be an orderly development of public systems. There'd be no transportation issues within this annexation of CCS zone, as well as, like I mentioned before, it provides city sewer and water. It is a compatible use within the surrounding areas, being commercial as well. And then it is falling and complying in line with the comprehensive plan and the other master plans, as well as the Highway 41 corridor master plan. Looking at the completion and continuation of a pedestrian network, this would, upon further development, increase that connectivity with the sidewalk along the going east and west south of Mullen as well, so that would help people to get around to the other uses of commercial in that area. And then at the annexation agreement inclusions, there's only one, and that would be the dedication of right-of-way and easements. There'd be a total of 10 feet on the south side of Mullen for this, just providing for the sidewalk, the utility easements included with that. And then these were the agencies that were routed to comment. And then Post Falls Police Department and Kootenai County Fire and Rescue remain neutral in this proposal.
President Nathan. Thank you. Anyone wishing to testify?
We have none.
Close the public hearing. Pretty straightforward. Council, how would you like that?
I'd move to approve file number ANNX-0005-2019 with the CCS zone.
Second.
Motion and second. Further discussion? Roll call, please.
Wolfe?
Aye.
Malloy?
Aye.
Thoreson?
Aye.
Anthony?
Aye.
Wilhelm?
Aye.
Motion passes. Thank you. And the last public hearing for the night is the amendment of Title 18 zoning and Title 18A SmartCode zoning on parking. Open public hearing.
Mayor and council members, how are you doing?
Fabulous.
Okay, so as we discussed in the workshop, I'm going to go through the PowerPoint as I presented it there. If you have any further questions, happy to answer them. If anybody from the audience has questions, happy to answer them. This is addressing two sections within the Post Falls Code, the Smart Code for zoning as well as the Standard Zoning Code, primarily related to driveways, the parking counts within the downtown, as well as the length of driveways in the the other zoning areas such as single family and duplex locations. The beginning that I started with previously, again, one of the things that we wanted to address through this code change is building configuration for the smart code zones, the SC2 through the SC6. This relates to the building orientation and connectivity to the sidewalks. We added this language, we would like to add this language relating to having the entrance readily identifiable, such as through the use of canopies, forecourts, porticos, clear stories, windows, and architectural details. We also note on here all entrances must be connected to the sidewalk within the public frontage and or private frontage, providing a concrete, asphalt, or utilizing pavers for that connection. Again, this is about orientation and design criteria within the smart code zones. Specifically, we relate the smart code to the downtown. While there are other smart codes within the city, this is the primary area that you will see the smart code zoning. Parking and density calculations, these are specific to the SC4, 5, and 6 zones. In terms of building density on a lot for a non-residential or vertical mixed use, it is determined by the sum of the actual parking calculated as provided within the lot, along the parking lane corresponding to the lot frontage, or by paying fees in lieu of. We are looking to move from having a calculation for the parking on street, going from 100% of that calculation going towards the development, reducing it to 50% may apply towards the required parking for non-residential or vertical mixed-use buildings. Whereas if it is specifically a residential use, we would be looking to limit that to no more than 25% of the required parking can be provided in the parking lanes or on-street parking. This is an example of some of the on-street parking that you would see within the downtown. This is part of the city center parking plan. As you can see, many of the parking spaces are going to be diagonal, which would add a number of parking spaces in front of many of these lots. Currently, the regulation allows for all of those parking spaces to count towards the requirements for anything that is constructed on that parcel or parcels. Whereas with the change in the regulations, it would be reduced to 50%, up maximum of 50% of that be applied towards the requirement for the non-residential and vertical mixed use, or only 25% counting towards a residential property. So in addition, we had talked about the in lieu of counting as parking requirements. Currently, the city does have language in the regulations regarding payments in lieu of building the parking spaces on site. This would allow for a developer to essentially buy out of constructing some of the parking on site to be put into a fund that the city would later utilize to construct additional parking within that downtown area. The limitations that we put on this is when if 8 or fewer parking spaces are required, you can only buy out of up to 50% of them. If there are 9 to 20 parking spaces required on the site, you can only buy out for 40%. And if there's greater than 21 parking spaces required, 30% is the maximum that you can buy out of that. In any case, no more than 15 parking spaces may be bought out or paid the fee in lieu of. The fee in lieu of, as noted on the previous slide, is calculated by the average tax assessed property value in the downtown per square foot multiplied by 270 square feet. That's the average size of a parking stall on a portion of the access drive. So that will be calculated and reviewed on a yearly basis to determine that it is still a valid calculation. After the city, one of the other things is that the city will establish a fund to put these funds in, and every year the staff will do a review of the construction costs associated with this and include that within the fee resolution that is presented to the council. And if there is a greater modification to the actual construction costs, that fee will reflect those changes. Also, pieces that are being modified within the code. In the SC4 zone, we allow for limited retail in those areas. Currently, it is stated that they are only to be at corner locations and not more than one per block, and that it is a specific use shall be further limited to neighborhood stores or food service seating in that area, and no more than 40 seats in that area. We're removing those two pieces from this so to add a greater flexibility to the limited amount of retail that will be permitted in the SC4 zones. Also in the table that will be modified under the SC5 and 6 zones, the parking spaces that are required for each residential unit in the SC5 and SC6 will go from 1 parking space per unit to 1.5 parking spaces per unit, trying to reflect on more of the actual demand at this time and the availability of extra parking within the downtown. This is also a table that will be modified within the code. Again, this is specifically showing the change from 1 parking space per dwelling unit to 1.5 parking spaces per dwelling unit. Another section, this is within the Title 18, the zoning code within the Post Falls Code. Front yard setbacks for garages is a minimum of 20 feet measured from the front of the garage to the property line or the edge of the sidewalk nearest the structure if the sidewalk has been constructed outside of the right-of-way in an easement, whichever is closer to the garage. So this is kind of a change in a definition as to how a driveway is measured. As you can see from this illustration, the red line is indicated as the property line, whereas the blue line is the back of the sidewalk. There is a difference there in approximately 2.5 feet, and this modification is intended to be permitted in areas by administrative exception when there is no further expectation that the city will need to widen the right-of-way or place new sidewalks that are going to be larger than currently proposed or existing. So what this does is it allows for, under certain circumstances, for us to provide a 2.5 foot differential between the garage and the property line and or sidewalk. This is kind of to illustrate this point. We look to have at least 20 feet between that garage door and the sidewalk so that your standard vehicles will not overhang the sidewalk, obstructing it to pedestrian access. Here's the language that refers to the administrative exception. And we note here that a maximum 20% reduction in required setback from external property lines, provided that front yard setback for a residential structure cannot be reduced below 10 feet to the front of the residence or 20 feet to the front of the garage, measured from the edge of the sidewalk nearest the structure. If no sidewalk is present, front yard setbacks may not be reduced through an administrative exception. And the one below it kind of works on cleaning up that same language. As noted here, this is also kind of just cleaning up some of the language we have. We have added each driveway must have a drive approach that meets city standards, and that, again, clean up driveways to residential residences must measure a minimum of 14 feet in width and 20 feet in length. Again, a standard size driveway, being able to provide that 20 feet in length to hold your standard vehicles. These are the agencies that were notified. We have not received any comments regarding these regulation changes. Do you have any questions?
Any questions, Bob? No.
Bob, I got thinking about this. If you go back to that slide, way back, street, the parking in front of the business kind of thing. Okay, yeah. So I'm trying to visualize if a person wants to put a business on a downtown street, yeah, where would you propose they put the parking that they can't put in front? Are all the businesses, we won't see storefronts like we do like in downtown Coeur d'Alene or downtown Spokane?
We do hope to, absolutely. No, the way that the SmartCode is written is it really does push buildings to be oriented towards that sidewalk.
Yeah.
You know, creating, you know, lesser setbacks in some areas, 0 setback or 5 feet of setback, so that they can be right up to the sidewalk. The parking would then be behind the buildings, so that it's not visible, not as visible from the street. You may not, what we won't be as likely to get are curb cuts, driveways going in off of these types of streets. They will be more off of side streets or potentially even alley access.
Okay, so that's, I guess that's what I was looking at. When I looked at that picture, I was like, okay, I put a business there and I can only use 6 of those spaces, even though I need, 20.
Right.
Where do I put the other 18 or whatever?
On their parcel behind their building.
Or pay the fee?
Or pay, well, yeah, again, you have to put something on your parcel.
Yeah,
You're
you
not
gotta
getting
put
out of putting something on a parcel, so.
But you could put it on the back.
Yes, you put it on the back, behind the building.
Thanks, I'm good.
Any other questions? Anyone wishing to testify?
We have none.
We'll close the public hearing. Council, how would you like that? Thanks, Bob.
Thank you.
I'd move to approve the amendment to Title 18 zoning and Title 18A Smart Code zoning on parking, file number TA-0003-2019, Title 18A text amendment and Title 18 text amendment.
Second.
Motion second. Further discussion? Shannon, please take the roll.
Malloy,
Aye.
Thoreson,
Aye.
Anthony,
Aye.
Wilhelm,
Aye.
Wolfe.
Aye.
Motion passes. Thank you. Next item on the agenda is a citizens' issue, and this section of the agenda is reserved for citizens wishing to address the council regarding a city-related issue that is not on the agenda. If anyone cares to address the council, please come forward and give your name. See no takers. Next item up is new business. Tonight we have none. Ordinances and resolutions, we have none. Administrative staff reports,
We have none, sir.
moving right through it. Mayor comments, none tonight. Council comments. That's quick. And we do not need an executive session,
We do not.
so the next motion is,
Adjourn.
all those in favor?
Aye.
Meeting adjourned. Thank you.
Blew through the last half.
That was great.